Coming up today, President Park Geun-hye calls for an overhaul of Korea's R&D sector in order to stay competitive in the 21st century. She says success will help the Korean economy flourish. South Korea and the US reiterate their commitment to pressuring North Korea over its nuclear weapons program. Seoul's defense ministry says Pyongyang could still test a fifth nuclear bomb at any time. First, outgoing Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff maintains her innocence and calls the Senate's decision to impeach her a coup. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Friday, May 13th, here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this morning, President Park Geun-hye met with senior government officials and representatives from Korea's science and tech sector on Thursday as the country looks to establish a control tower for the nation's science and technology policies. Our presidential office correspondent Song Ji-sun starts us off.
The tech sector is on the cusp of a fourth industrial revolution, but Korea is stuck in a nutcracker situation between high-tech countries and emerging economies, which are catching up fast with the developments in Korea. At the first strategic meeting for science and technology, President Park stressed that the two fields are the basis of the creative economy, and reforming the nation's research and development system is the key to Seoul regain its edge in the global market.
앞으로 과학기술 전략회의를 통해서 핵심 과학기술 정책과 사업에 대해 톱다운 방식의 전략을 마련하고 부처 간 이견 대립 사안들을 조정해 나가면서 우리 R&D 시스템의 근본적 혁신도 추진해 나갈 것입니다.
Projects requiring long-term government oversight will be carried out in a top-down manner, but private projects for research and development will work from the bottom up, meaning they will reflect market demand so they can quickly adapt to fast-developing technologies. Another key goal is restructuring research and development resources, and there will be major reforms for each project. Funding and other forms of support for all government-led projects will now be reviewed at the outset to maximize efficiency. Reflecting global trends in technology and Seoul's policy directions, the government will also designate strategic projects on a national level. These projects will be accompanied by a package of support that ranges from tax benefits to deregulation. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
So, under this new system, science and tech projects will be designated by fundamentally changing the way the country selects, evaluates and allocates its budget for research and development. Our Kim Ji-yeon has the details.
Despite the large proportion of state funding for research and development, more than $16.3 billion for this year alone, the government believes the money isn't being spent in a way that will advance science and technology and make the country a leader in the fourth industrial revolution. It often takes at least 2 years before projects receive R&D funding, which lags behind rapidly changing IT trends, in particular those related to the Internet of Things, big data, and artificial intelligence. On top of that, clusters of projects that are underway by state and private research institutions, universities, and industries have often overlapped with each other or with other government projects. That's why the government wants to bring prospective projects and related ministries together under a new R&D model that's similar to the U.S. DARPA project and Japan's cross-ministerial strategic innovation promotion program. From there, it would designate strategic projects in IT and allocate and manage available resources from the top.
Under the new system, related agencies will have different goals to direct their R&D funding. Universities will be focused on the development of basic research and training young researchers, while research institutions will focus on the development of open source and proprietary technology, and the industrial sector will be focused on the commercialization of the technology.
Under the system, researchers will only need to submit research proposals of less than 5 pages, a drastic reduction from the previous 100, helping them focus on their research instead of spending an undue amount of time and effort on administrative work. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye will meet with the floor leaders of Korea's three main political parties later on this Friday. Earlier this week, Saenuri Party floor leader Jung Jin-sok told reporters the meeting will be held at 3 p.m. Korea time at the presidential office of Cheongwa-dae. Jung, Minju Party of Korea floor leader Yoo Sang-ho and the People's Party floor leader Park Ji-won will be there, along with their respective chief policymakers. The public is keeping a close eye on the gathering as it could set the tone for President Park's relations with the incoming National Assembly, which begins at the end of this month. UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon will visit South Korea and Japan this month to attend some international conferences. Ban's spokesman says the UN chief will visit Korea's southern resort island of Jeju on May 25th for a regional multilateral dialogue promoting peace and prosperity in East Asia that is known as the Jeju Forum. He will then travel to Japan on May 27th for the G7 summit before coming back to Korea on May 30th for the UN Department of Public Information and Non-Governmental Organization Conference. That's going to happen in the southeastern city of Gyeongju. Now, Ban's visit to Korea, his first in about 1 year, comes after the ruling Saenuri Party's crushing defeat in last month's general elections. The Secretary-General has been in the spotlight as many speculate he may run for president in 2017 as his second five-year term as UN chief ends later this year. South Korea and the United States have reiterated their commitment to denuclearizing the Korean peninsula at their biannual security talks that happened in Washington. Connie Kim with the details.
South Korea and the U.S. reiterated their mutual cooperation on deterring threats coming from North Korea and will continue to seek various ways to curb its provocations. Wrapping up the two-day Korea-U.S. integrated defense dialogue held in Washington, Seoul said Thursday the two countries have reconfirmed that the North's fourth nuclear test, its intercontinental ballistic missile, and submarine-launched ballistic missile launches are a grave threat not only to Seoul-Washington alliance, but also to the world's peace and security. The two allies also called on Pyongyang to give up its nuclear arms in a, quote, complete, verifiable, and irreversible way in their biannual defense talks. Pyongyang has risen to be a great concern in regional security after forging ahead with a nuclear test, long-range missile, and SLBM launches this year. What's more, the possibility of another nuke test at the regime's Punggye-ri nuclear test site, the same location where the previous 4 tests were held, remains unchanged.
North Korea has completed preparations for a test at the Punggye-ri test site. We are continuously monitoring the developments there.
Recent satellite imagery at Punggye-ri showed low levels of activity at main portals, and vehicles from the command center have withdrawn, suggesting a test is not expected anytime soon. But South Korean military officials are keeping close tabs of the nuclear test site, not ruling out the possibility of Pyongyang carrying out a surprise nuclear test at the least expected moment. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Russia's foreign ministry has called on South Korea, the United States and North Korea to refrain from military activity to avoid aggravating tensions on the Korean peninsula. The remark comes amid a delay in the UN Security Council's adoption of a media statement responding to North Korea's firing of a mid-range ballistic missile last month. In an interview with Seoul-based Yonhap news agency, Russia's foreign ministry spokesman called for all the relevant countries to follow the path to a political and diplomatic resolution while acknowledging that it endorses the UN sanctions on North Korea. Now, this seems to support claims the press statement's delay was primarily prompted by Moscow's demand that it include calls for restraint in military activity by related nations. Now, earlier this year, the South Korean government laid out measures to slow the explosive pace of mortgage lending in the country. And while the measures have proven relatively successful in curbing lending at Korea's biggest banks, they have had a negative impact as well. Shin Se-min with the details.
The government's introduction of tougher lending requirements was meant to control Korea's mounting household debt, but it has sparked some issues of its own. In February, the Financial Services Commission stepped in, ordering commercial banks to start screening mortgage applicants more carefully. Under the Commission's mandatory guidelines, banks are required to base their decision on a household's ability to repay the principal and the interest together. Before, banks had extended handsome grace periods to help applicants push back the payment burden. The move came as Korea's household debt reached an all-time high of $1.02 trillion in February, growing $104 billion in the space of a year. The Bank of Korea says the pace of mortgage loan growth from commercial banks slowed by $1.6 billion in the first 3 months of the year compared to the same period last year. But loans taken from secondary financial institutions, where interest rates are generally much higher, hit $217 billion as of February, the highest figure tallied since the central bank started collecting related data in 2003. It's not a healthy trend, according to market watchers.
Most of the loans taken out from secondary and tertiary financial institutions are by borrowers that are more vulnerable in their financial standing. This will in turn become a much heavier burden on them should the key interest rate surge in the future.
On top of that, the property market, which got a boost from government-led monetary stimulus measures, appears to be in a downturn. In its latest report, Korea Development Institute said the 26% on-year drop in home transactions in the first quarter comes in well below a 5-year average. Experts say purchasing sentiment was dragged down by the new lending guidelines. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The number of single-person households in Korea is rising rapidly. As of now, a quarter of the population lives on their lonesome. Compared to families, their needs are simple, yet most are struggling to get by financially. For a closer look at the challenges they face, Ian Shin reports.
The number of single-person households in Korea corresponded to 25% of the entire population in 2012 and is expected to rise up to 34% within 23 years. The rising number has prompted new trends and lifestyle patterns along with daily obstacles, including management of expenses. A survey conducted by Statistics Korea revealed that food expenses comprised the largest portion of spending among single-person households last year, followed by housing expenditures. But according to reports by Korea Consumers Agency released on Thursday, the majority of people who live alone said housing fees are their biggest financial struggle.
Overall, my monthly spending is around $1,400. Of that sum, I use about $700 in rent. In reality, it's almost impossible to get an inexpensive apartment for a single person. $700 is actually relatively cheap for a single bedroom.
More than half of the people who participate in the survey also responded by saying that more affordable studios or one-bedroom apartments could be the fundamental solution to their financial struggles. Experts at the Consumer Agency added that an increase in the production of housing supplies such as furniture targeted only towards single-person households could also help this growing demographic group reduce their spending on basic necessities. Yoon Shin, Arirang News.
The outgoing Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff has promised to fight her impeachment by all legal means. In a speech to the nation, Rousseff said it was a coup and a farce, denying she had committed any crimes. Rousseff has been suspended following Thursday's Senate vote to impeach her. She's accused of illegally manipulating finances to mask a ballooning public deficit in the run-up to her re-election in 2014. The Vice President, Michel Temer, will take over as acting head of state. He has already named a cabinet. Well, that's pretty much all we have for now on this Friday morning here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. Just a reminder that there are many ways to follow our news here on Arirang TV. Firstly, you can go to our website, which is arirang.com/news. We also have a smartphone application. All you have to do there is go to your app store and search for Arirang TV. And thirdly and finally, you can go to our Facebook page. All you have to do is search for Arirang News, click like, and your news feed will be full of all our news videos, which is very nice. It is Friday, so if we don't see you over the course of the day, do have a wonderful weekend. We will be back with our next scheduled newscast, though, at 10 a.m. Korea time with our very own Han Da-an. So until then, goodbye.